Gerald Blackwell walked through the wrought-iron gates of Oakwood, cemetery with measured steps, the autumn leaves crunching beneath his polished shoes. At 68, his hair had gone completely white, his beard silver against the black wool of his coat. He made this walk every Sunday, rain or shine, visiting the grave of his son Matthew, who had died 5 years ago at the age of 32. Gerald was worth nearly $4 billion, built from a lifetime of shrewd investments and successful business ventures. But none of that wealth could bring back his son. Matthew had been his only child, the center of his world after. Gerald's wife had passed away from cancer when Matthew was just 10. Father and son had been inseparable, until a drunk driver had taken Matthew away one rainy April evening. As Gerald approached Matthew's grave, a simple but elegant headstone of polished granite, he stopped abruptly. Two small figures knelt before it, their heads bowed. They were girls, identical twins, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, wearing matching coats, one red, one yellow. Their dark hair was pulled back in ponytails, and they held hands as they knelt in the fallen leaves. Gerald's first instinct was to wait, to give them privacy. But curiosity and confusion held him in place. Why would children be visiting Matthew's grave? He had no other family, no nieces or nephews. Gerald approached quietly, not wanting to startle them. As he drew closer, he could hear their small voices, speaking in unison as if they'd practiced the words many times. "Thank you for saving us," they said softly. "Thank you for giving us a chance to live. We wish we could have met you. We wish we could tell you how grateful we are. Please watch over our mama. She misses you." Gerald felt his breath catch. His vision blurred with sudden tears. Saving them? Giving them a chance to live? What did that mean? The girls must have sensed his presence because they turned in unison, their eyes, deep brown and solemn, fixing on him. They didn't seem afraid, just curious. "Are you here to visit someone?" one of them asked politely. Gerald's voice came out rough with emotion. "Yes, I'm here to visit my son, Matthew Blackwell. This is his grave." The girls' eyes widened. They looked at each other, then back at Gerald, and without warning, they both burst into tears. Not quiet tears, but great heaving sobs that shook their small bodies. Gerald, alarmed, knelt down despite the dampness of the ground. "What's wrong?" "Please, don't cry." "I didn't mean to upset you." The girl in the red coat, her name tag said Sophia, spoke through her tears. "You're Matthew's daddy." "You're really his daddy?" "Yes, I am." "But how do you know my son? What did you mean about him saving you?" The other girl, her tag read Isabella, wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "He gave us his heart and his liver. When he died, he saved our lives." Gerald felt the world tilt. His hand went to the headstone to steady himself. Matthew had been an organ donor. Gerald had signed the papers at the hospital, numb with grief, knowing it was what Matthew would have wanted. But he'd never asked about the recipients. The pain had been too raw, too immediate. He'd donated Matthew's organs and then tried to bury the knowledge along with his son. "You received Matthew's organs?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia nodded. "I got his heart. Bella got part of his liver. We were both dying. The doctor said we maybe had a few weeks. And then they said someone had died and that person was going to save us. We were only 3 years old, so we don't remember much. But Mama tells us the story. She says we're alive because someone chose to give, even when they were losing everything," Isabella added. "We come here every Sunday with Mama to say thank you. She says it's important to honor the gift we were given." Gerald's legs gave out and he sank fully to the ground, sitting in the leaves without caring about his expensive coat. Tears streamed down his face. "Matthew saved you." "My son saved you." A woman's voice came from behind him. "Girls, what's happening?" "Is everything all right?" Gerald turned to see a woman in her late 30s hurrying toward them. Concern etched on her face. She wore scrubs under a worn jacket. A nurse or medical professional, Gerald guessed. She was pretty, despite the worry lines, with the same dark hair as her daughters. "Mama!" Isabella called out. "This is Matthew's father. This is the daddy of the man who saved us." The woman stopped, her hand going to her mouth. "Mr. Blackwell? You know who I am?" Gerald managed. "I researched you. After the transplants, I wanted to know about the family who'd made such an incredible gift. But I was told you didn't want contact with the recipients. I respected that, but She trailed off, tears in her own eyes now. I've wanted to thank you for 5 years. To tell you what your son's sacrifice meant. Gerald struggled to stand, and the woman rushed forward to help him. The girls hovered nearby, still sniffling. I'm Elena Rodriguez, the woman said. And these are my daughters, Sophia and Isabella. They're alive because of your son. Gerald looked at the twins, really looked at them. They were healthy, vibrant, full of life. Sophia unconsciously put her hand over her heart. Matthew's heart. Isabella stood close to her sister the way twins do, two halves of a whole. Tell me, Gerald said hoarsely. Tell me everything. I need to know. They sat together on a nearby bench. The girls on either side of Gerald while Elena told the story. The twins had been born premature, with congenital heart and liver defects. The doctors had done what they could. But by the time they were 3, both girls were failing. They needed transplants urgently. But finding matches for both of them seemed impossible. I was a single mother, Elena said quietly. Working as an ER nurse trying to keep my girls alive, watching them get weaker every day. I prayed for a miracle, even though I felt guilty praying for something that meant someone else had to die. She wiped her eyes. And then one night they got the call. A match had been found for both of them. It was almost unheard of, for twins to both get what they needed from the same donor. The doctor said it was 1 in a million. They said your son was their exact blood type. Their exact size, everything matched perfectly. Gerald listened, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. I didn't know. I signed the papers, but I couldn't face knowing who received his organs. It felt like losing him all over again. I understand, Elena said. But Mr. Blackwell, you should know. Your son didn't just save my daughter's lives. He saved mine, too. I was drowning in medical debt, in grief, in fear. The transplants gave me my girls back. I got to watch them grow up. I got to see them start school, make friends, live normal lives. Every day with them is a gift from your son. Sophia tugged on Gerald's coat sleeve. Can I tell you something? Gerald looked down at her, this child carrying his son's heart. Of course. Sometimes when I'm really quiet, I can feel it. The heart. And it feels warm and safe, like it's protecting me. Mama says that's just in my imagination, but I think maybe your son is still there, just a little bit, watching over me. Gerald's composure shattered completely. He pulled the little girl into a hug, and Isabella joined them, and then Elena, and they all wept together among the gravestones and fallen leaves. When they finally pulled apart, Gerald felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years, a sense of peace. Matthew was gone, but he lived on, not just in memory, but in these 2 bright-eyed girls who visited his grave every Sunday to say thank you. Would you tell me about him? Elena asked. About Matthew? The girls know he saved them, but they don't know who he was. And so Gerald talked. He told them about Matthew's love of music, how he'd played guitar and written his own songs. He told them about Matthew's work at a non-profit that helped homeless youth, about his terrible jokes and his generous heart. He told them about the father-son, fishing trips, and the way Matthew had taken care of Gerald after his wife died. He was the best person I've ever known, Gerald said. And I've been so angry that he was taken so young. I've spent 5 years asking why. Why him? Why my son? He looked at the girls. But now I see. He didn't just die. He gave life. He saved you. Over the following weeks, Gerald became part of the Rodriguez family's life. He learned that Elena was struggling financially despite working full-time as an ER nurse. The ongoing medical care for the twins, while covered by insurance, still involved co-pays and expenses that added up. Elena's car was on its last legs. Her apartment was small and run down, and she worked extra shifts whenever she could to make ends meet. Gerald didn't immediately reveal the extent of his wealth, but he began to help in small ways. A reliable car from a company raffle that Elena had supposedly won, an anonymous scholarship fund that would cover any medical expenses, not covered by insurance, a better apartment that just happened to have the rent reduced. But more importantly, Gerald gave them his time and his heart. He attended the girls' school events and art shows. He taught them to play chess and took them to museums. He was there for birthdays and holidays, the grandfather they'd never had. For Gerald, the twins became his connection to Matthew, his proof that his son's life had mattered. that his death had meaning, but they also became precious to him in their own right. Two remarkable little girls, who faced each day with courage and gratitude. One evening, about 6 months after that first meeting at the cemetery, Gerald sat with Elena after the girls had gone to bed. They'd had dinner at his house. He'd finally revealed who he was and how much he could help, and Elena had been overwhelmed but grateful. "I want to do something," Gerald said. "I want to establish a foundation in Matthew's name to help families dealing with pediatric transplants, to cover the costs that insurance doesn't, to provide support, to make it easier for people like you who are trying to keep their children alive." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Gerald, that's beautiful." "I want you to run it. You understand what these families go through. You've lived it. And I'll fund it completely, whatever it needs." The Matthew Blackwell Foundation was established within the year. Elena left her nursing job to run it full-time. And Gerald provided the resources to make it one of the most effective transplant support organizations in the country. They helped hundreds of families, covering expenses, providing emotional support, and connecting recipients with donor families when both sides wanted that connection. But perhaps the most touching aspect was the garden they created behind the Foundation's building, a memorial garden where donor families could plant trees and flowers in honor of their loved ones, where recipients could come to reflect and give thanks. At the center was a plaque with Matthew's name and a quote he'd loved. "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." The twins thrived. Sophia discovered a love of music. "It's the heart," she'd insist. Matthew's heart loves music, and learned to play the guitar. Isabella became passionate about medicine, already talking about becoming a transplant surgeon when she grew up. On the 5th anniversary of that meeting in the cemetery, Gerald stood with Elena and the twins at Matthew's grave once again. But this time they weren't alone. Dozens of families were there, all people who'd been helped by the foundation, all touched in some way by Matthew's legacy. Sophia and Isabella, now 12 years old, had written a song for the occasion. They performed it there in the cemetery, Sophia on the guitar that had once been Matthew's, both girls singing in harmony. The song was called "The Gift," and it spoke of the courage it takes to let go, the love that transcends death, and the way one life can ripple outward to touch countless others. As Gerald listened to the girls sing, their voices strong and clear, Sophia's hand absently resting over her heart. Matthew's heart. He finally understood. Matthew's death had nearly destroyed him, but in that destruction, in that terrible loss, something new had been born. Not a replacement for what he'd lost, but something equally precious. A new family, a renewed purpose, and the knowledge that love doesn't end with death. After the ceremony, as people mingled and shared stories, Isabella came to stand beside Gerald. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" she asked. She'd started calling him that a year ago, and each time she said it, Gerald's heart swelled. "I'm more than okay," Gerald said honestly. "I'm grateful. For you, for your sister, for your mother. For this second chance at family. We're grateful too," Isabella said. "We know we can never replace Matthew, and we don't want to. But we love you, and we're so glad you found us. Or we found you." However it worked. Sophia joined them, slipping her hand into Gerald's. "Do you think he knows?" she asked. "Matthew, do you think he knows what happened? That his heart is still beating, still loving people? That he saved us and helped all these other families too?" Gerald looked up at the sky, remembering his son's smile, his laugh, his enormous heart. "Yes," he said with certainty. "I think he knows, and I think he's proud of all of us." That night, Gerald sat in his study, looking at a photograph of Matthew that he'd finally been able to display again. Beside it was a newer photo of him with the twins, all three of them laughing at something Elena had said. He thought about that day at the cemetery, when he'd heard two little girls praying at his son's grave. He'd thought his grief would kill him. He'd thought he had nothing left to live for. But he'd been wrong. Matthew's death had given life to the twins, and the twins had given new life and purpose to Gerald. Out of tragedy had come something beautiful, a family knitted together not by blood, but by the ultimate gift, by sacrifice and gratitude, by the understanding that love is stronger than death. Gerald pulled out his journal and began to write, something he did every night now. He wrote about Matthew, about the girls, about Elena, about the foundation and the families they were helping. He wrote about the transformation from grief to hope, from despair to purpose, and he ended the entry as he always did. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for your generous heart, in life and in death. Thank you for saving these precious girls. Thank you for teaching me that there's always a reason to hope, always a reason to love, always a reason to keep going. Your heart still beats, your legacy still grows, and your father still loves you forever and always. In a bedroom across town, Sophia lay in bed with her hand over her heart, feeling its steady rhythm. She thought about the man who'd given her this gift, about the father who'd found them at the gravesite and become their grandfather. She thought about all the ways that life and death were intertwined, how something terrible could lead to something beautiful. Thank you, Matthew, she whispered into the darkness, a prayer that had become her nightly ritual. Thank you for my life. I promise I'll make it count. And in that moment, with Matthew's heart beating steadily in her chest, carrying love forward into the future, Sophia fell asleep, content in the knowledge that some gifts truly do last forever.